They told you the story was simple, but what if the one man who was actually in the room, the one person who held the truth in his own hands, has been quietly saying for years that something doesn't add up, and nobody wanted to listen?
Born on Friday in Santa Barbara, California.
Address a theory that many people out there have been speculating on, that Meghan Markle has lied about her age.
August 4th, 40 years ago, Meghan was born, and she was born as a C-section.
A father remembers the moment his daughter entered the world. Not vaguely, not in fragments. He remembers the exact second her tiny hand wrapped around his finger, the weight of her, the silence before the first cry. That kind of memory doesn't blur with time, it brands itself into you. And yet, here we are, staring at a timeline that he insists doesn't match what he lived. And this isn't just anyone talking. This is Thomas Markle, the man who wasn't outside the room. He wasn't hearing updates through a nurse or pacing in a hallway. He says he was there, present, witnessing everything as it happened. The first person to hold her after a C-section delivery. That's not a detail you casually misremember decades later. That's the kind of moment that becomes part of your identity. So why would that same man keep circling back to one specific issue? Not emotions. Not family drama, not public fallout, just one thing: the dates don't match. And here's where it starts to feel uncomfortable, because this isn't a one-time slip. He didn't just mention it once and move on. He's been consistent, repeating the same concern, the same discrepancy over and over again, even as everything else in his life unraveled. Estrangement, public backlash, health crises. None of it changed the core of what he was saying. That's not noise, that's persistence. And persistence like that, it usually comes from certainty. Now think about this. A man approaching 80, dealing with serious health issues, still trying to reconnect with his daughter, still hoping for a conversation, still holding on to this one detail that refuses to let go. That doesn't sound like someone chasing attention. That sounds like someone who believes he's been ignored for too long. And yet, every time he spoke, the conversation shifted. Not to the date, not to the numbers, but to him, his motives, his credibility, his past, everything except the one thing he kept pointing at. And that's where things start to feel deliberate. Because when someone brings up a specific checkable fact, a date, a number, a timeline, you don't debate their feelings. You verify the claim. You look at the record. You compare. But that didn't happen here. Instead, the spotlight moved away from the question and onto the man asking it.
But as long as my daughter has the attitude that she doesn't want me to see them.
And people noticed, because strip everything else away, the royal drama, the media frenzy, the years of silence, and what you're left with is something incredibly simple. A first-hand witness saying, what I saw doesn't match what's being told. That's not gossip. That's conflict. That's not speculation. That's contradiction. And contradictions don't just disappear. They linger. They wait. They resurface in the quiet moments when someone finally asks, hold on, how does that make sense? And then, just when it seemed like this question might fade into the background like so many others, something else surfaced. Something printed. Permanent, untouchable, a magazine. Flip to page 90 of a 1997 issue of 17 magazine. Nothing flashy, nothing screaming for attention. Just a single line, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. An age. Now stop right there, because this wasn't posted online where things can be edited, deleted, rewritten. This wasn't hearsay bouncing around social media. This was ink on paper, distributed, archived, locked in time before anyone had a reason to manipulate anything, before the spotlight, before the scrutiny, before the world cared. And that's exactly why it matters. Because when something like that appears years before fame, years before narratives are crafted, it carries a different kind of weight, a quieter kind, a more dangerous kind.
In it mentions our Megsy is from Los Angeles and that she was 21 years old at the time of publication. That would
now stack that against the widely accepted birth year, 1981. Do the math. If that year is correct, she would have been 15 when that magazine hit shelves, not 21. 15. That's not a rounding error. That's not a typo you shrug off. That's a 6-year gap, and 6 years changes everything. Everything. Because in Hollywood, age isn't just a number. It's currency. It dictates opportunity. It shapes perception. It decides whether you're the rising star or the one already running out of time. And here's the part no one says out loud. loud. A 21-year-old entering the industry and someone nearing 30 are not treated the same, not even close. One is seen as fresh, full of potential, someone with years ahead. The other, already being measured, already being categorized, already being limited. So now the question isn't just about a number anymore, it's about narrative. Because if that number shifts, even slightly, the entire story built around it shifts too. The late bloomer story, the worked her way up story, the perfect timing story, all of it. And suddenly, what looked like one version of events starts to look like something else entirely. And here's the strangest part of all. No clear answer ever came. No direct explanation. No simple correction. Just silence and repetition. The same birth year echoed again and again until it stopped being questioned, until it felt untouchable. But unanswered questions don't disappear. They wait. And this one? It's been waiting a long time. And just when you think this is only about a number, about a date that may or may not line up, the story takes a darker turn. Because suddenly, it's not just the timeline that starts shifting, it's the access to the one man who kept questioning it. The same man who never changed his story. The same man who kept pointing at that gap. The same man who refused to let that one detail disappear. Now imagine this. Years of being dismissed, years of being painted as bitter, unreliable, attention-seeking, and yet through all of it, he never stopped returning to the same core point. The timeline doesn't match what I remember. Not once did that message change. Not once did it evolve into something else. That kind of consistency, it's either complete fabrication or complete conviction. And here's where it gets unsettling. Because instead of answering the question, something else kept happening. The people who supported that earlier version of events, the ones who had their own memories, their own pieces of the timeline, they didn't step forward louder. They faded. One by one, quietly, almost like the moment they started aligning with that version, their credibility began to crumble in the public eye before they could even be heard properly. Coincidence? Maybe. But patterns like that, they make you pause. Because when multiple voices begin to disappear around a single unresolved question, it stops feeling random and starts feeling controlled. And still, no documents were brought forward to settle it. No definitive clarification. No moment where someone said, here it is, this is the truth, just repetition. The same story told enough times across enough platforms until it hardened into something people stopped questioning altogether. Because that's how narratives survive. Not by being proven, but by being repeated. And then something happened that cracked open an entirely new layer of doubt. Not about age, not about Hollywood, but about something far more concrete. Documents. Official records. The kind people assume are permanent, untouchable, final. But what if they're not? Because there was a moment, small, almost invisible if you weren't paying attention, where an official record didn't stay the same. It changed. A birth certificate, not hers, but close enough to matter. When Archie's birth certificate was first filed, it carried one version of information: names, details, identity as it was originally submitted. And then it was altered, not dramatically, not in a way that triggered headlines, but enough. Her name, the one listed at the beginning, was replaced with a royal title. And suddenly, the document that existed on day one wasn't the same document people could access later. Now pause on that, because it tells you something most people don't think about. Records can be revised, quietly, without fanfare, without most people even noticing. And once that door opens, even slightly, it changes how you look at everything else. Because now the question becomes unavoidable. If one official document can be updated after the fact, what else can? And suddenly that persistent voice, the one everyone dismissed, doesn't sound quite as easy to ignore anymore. Because his question was never complicated. It was simple. Is what we're seeing now what was always there? Or has something changed along the way? That's it. No conspiracy theories. No dramatic accusations. Just a question that never got answered. And then, as if the situation wasn't already heavy enough, the story shifts again. This time, far away from the headlines, far away from the public eye, into a hospital room in another country. Thomas Markle. Alone? No. That's the first twist, because he wasn't abandoned. He wasn't left without support. His son was there, physically present, handling everything, making decisions, acting as the official voice when his father couldn't. That's important, because it means there was already a clear structure in place, a chain of communication, a trusted person on the ground, everything functioning the way it normally would in a situation like that. And then, out of nowhere, something unexpected happened. U.S. Embassy officials showed up at the hospital, unannounced. Now think about that carefully. Embassy visits like that don't just happen randomly. They're not casual drop-ins. They're triggered by specific circumstances, usually when someone is alone, vulnerable, or without a support system. But that wasn't the case here. He had family. He had representation. He had someone authorized to make decisions. So why were they there? That question never got a clear answer either. But what happened next? That's where everything shifts. Because after that visit, something changed. Not visibly, not dramatically, but administratively. A new name was added to the list of people authorized to receive updates about his condition. Just one change, one quiet adjustment. On paper, it looks harmless, routine, almost insignificant. But in reality, it changes everything. Because before that moment, information flowed through one person, his son. Direct, personal, immediate. After that, there was another route, another access point. One that didn't require a phone call, didn't require physical presence, didn't require connection. And just like that, the way information moved around him changed completely. And here's why that matters more than people realize. Because for years, Thomas Markle was the one consistent source of that conflicting memory. The one person who could directly speak, directly question, directly challenge the timeline. As long as he was reachable, that version of events stayed alive. But once the channel shifted, once access became filtered, something else happened. His voice became quieter, not because he changed his mind, not because he corrected himself, but because the pathway that carried his words wasn't the same anymore. And when that happens, when a voice isn't erased but simply becomes harder to hear, the effect is almost identical. Silence, not forced, just engineered through distance. And here's the part that lingers, the part that doesn't sit right no matter how you look at it. This entire story, all of it, didn't begin with the hospital visit. It didn't begin with family conflict. It didn't begin with public fallout. It started with a number, a single number printed in a magazine in 1997, a number that didn't match. It just needs time and repetition. And if no one successfully challenges it for long enough, it stops being questioned. It becomes reality. But every now and then, there's a crack, a detail that doesn't fit, a voice that doesn't align, a memory that refuses to match the record. And when you line all of those up, you don't get a clear answer. You get something else, a pattern, one that suggests this story might not be as simple as it was made to look. And maybe that's the real reason it was never directly addressed. Because some questions, they're more dangerous when they're answered than when they're left hanging.